What do you think is going to happen in the year 2039? Let's say it's your job to advise Patek Philippe. What should we plan now for the year 2039?
I think the key at the 200th anniversary is going to be a balance of the reflection on the road so far and creating new pathways forward.
Welcome back to the Collectability Podcast. What is the state of the watch world today?
The state of the watch world today, we're in a golden age in terms of creation. We're at a point now where any idea imagined can be created. The technology is advanced so far that the creative visions of watchmakers can be realized today. And this is why we see what we see out there on the market in terms of complexity of mechanisms, as well as form language of cases, shapes, complications. But it's also can go too far, right? When you depart from the traditions too far, and something can be over-engineered, and we can lose a little bit of the soul of what makes a watch a watch. So right now, I think we're in an era of possibility. We're in a design explosion, but we're also in an era that requires checks and balances, and to make sure that each product that's being created is truly representative of the brand's vision and ethos and mission of who's creating that watch. And it's very tempting today to go in directions that are counter to the ethos of a brand. And this can be celebrated by clients, this can be destroyed by clients, and those two things can happen at the same time. So it's a lot of unpredictability, a lot of possibility, and for me, it's huge for clients because we're seeing a diversity that we haven't seen in a very, very long time.
What brands, in your opinion, or what watchmakers, in your opinion, are getting it right, where they're looking at the past, they're looking at the future, and they're really have a long-term view? Which brands are getting it right today?
I think it's, the fascinating thing with the legacy brands is that it changes quickly. The product vision every few years can shift quite a bit. One brand that's been very exciting to see a shift in momentum is Vacheron Constantin. Always a celebrated brand, always a massively respected brand, but they seemed for a while there to be outside of the dialogue a little bit. And that's very much changed recently. They're very much central to the dialogue. Cartier as well is another one of those brands that's always been very well respected, always been admired, but wasn't always central to the dialogue about contemporary watchmaking, and they very much are present in it today. I think the legacy brands that are having a challenge are the ones that have iconic models that are their anchor points, but those iconic models don't necessarily reflect on today's aesthetics. So it's difficult because you want to honor and respect the path you took, but if that path doesn't speak to the emotional and intellectual mindset of clients today, it can be hard. And so you need to find other anchor points for those brands. Patek Philippe, of course, has been able to achieve this as well, but they've also been able to achieve this because of the people who associate with that brand. Somebody once asked me fairly recently in a private conversation, what's made the Grandmaster chime so successful? And my answer to them was, well, it's an incredible complication, and it's a beautiful watch, and it's part of the legacy of Patek Philippe, but my answer to that is Jay-Z. And it's not that I'm not overemphasizing celebrity endorsements, but at the same time, truly organic celebrity endorsements allow these incredible watches to be part of a broader dialogue. And that is so significant to the continued awareness of what we do and why we do it. When you have people like Jay who are so meticulous in everything they do, their fan bases are very keenly aware of the watches that are worn on their wrists in that sense. So I think that's a really exciting time for me. And this is what the book I'm working on is about. It's not about celebrity endorsements at all. It's about people who genuinely have deep, deep passion for these objects, what they mean, what they represent to themselves, how they're created and how they're made, who happen to be celebrities in these very influential positions.
Now, there's some kid out there, I hope, listening to this podcast, to these two old guys talking about the good old days, going back to us, hanging out in the basement, talking about the future. And remember the clock shop?
Oh, dude.
Tell us about that.
The clock shop. Well, you and I used to talk about one day when we're older, we imagined it about how old we are.
Exactly.
But I don't feel as old as I thought I would feel, by the way. I still feel very young inside. I don't know if you feel the same.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that's part of, by the way, I think that's the secret to happiness as you age, everybody, is keeping your passions close to your chest.
Yes.
I really believe that so deeply, and not being shy to communicate about them. I think it's huge. We're lucky, man. We're lucky that we discovered something so young that we were able to grow up with. And there's other things there too. But, the fact that the hobby is also our professions is very lucky and very, very fortunate. But wait, your question, back to your question. I missed it.
Yeah, no, we're reminiscing because it's really easy to go down that path.
The clock shop. The clock shop. Oh, yeah. I remember distinctly you and I talking about, because at that point, we knew that there could be a more exciting way to represent clocks. We had this vision of doing clock repair, clock restoration, and clock creation. We imagined a little shop in Massachusetts. We went through the whole vision together, John, and I remember it super, super well.
Hey, it's never too late.
It's never too late. I think. Well, look, we're hitting 50 soon. I think let's reconvene on this topic at our 65th birthday. All right.
Sounds good.
All right. We got a decade and a half before we go there.
And that's interesting because my next question is about a decade and a half from now. 16 years from now, 2039, it's the 200th anniversary of Patek Philippe. And you and I both know that I'm sure Thierry Stern and company are making the plans already, just starting of what will be next, what will be new, and how they're going to celebrate this monumental bicentennial. What do you think is going to happen in the year 2039? Let's say it's your job to advise Patek Philippe. What should we plan now for the year 2039?
Well, the first thing that we would do in this advisory session is look at the 150th and the 175th anniversary. That would be the first thing, to see what was done, what was released, and how the enthusiasts closest to the brand reacted and felt, and how those pieces have held up over time. I think the key at the 200th anniversary is going to be a balance of the reflection on the road so far and creating new pathways forward. And that, going back to the earlier question, that's one of the biggest challenges of legacy brands today, is how to create for the future when you have such important historical foundations. Because new models, as you know, are often met with mixed reactions. And
consistently
met with, and by the way, that's okay. I think that's the other thing that, as enthusiasts of watches and lovers of watches, as well as brands, need to accept that it's expected. If something is universally acclaimed at launch or at release, it might not be so memorable down the road. All of these things take a little bit of time to percolate, unless you're just doing something very safe, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you're doing something very safe, very conservative, it's okay in that sense. But I think what's going to be exciting for Patek Philippe is to see at the 200th anniversary, what will the next generation of 5216 look like? Because right now, 5216 is very close to 5016. Even I believe the caliber is even
the same caliber.
Yes. There's nothing wrong with having an old caliber, but what's the evolution going to look like? What new complications might enter the picture? What interpretations might we see of what Patek has always done best? And as a complications specialist, and that's my focal point, Patek combines complications like no one else, and they make it very seamless. And it's something that they've been doing right since the 80s. 3974 was such a game changer. It was so significant. Today, its age shows in some ways. I love it about that. But now it looks closer to the 50s in some ways than it does to today.
It does.
But in terms of the timeline, it's closer to then as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's understandable in that sense. I'm enthralled to see what they're going to be up to. But the trick is going to be creating new models and new mechanisms that honor the past while speaking to a clear future. And then internally, them recognizing and accepting the fact this is going to be a hit, this is going to be debated. But if they believe in that watch and they believe in its mechanism and its aesthetics, to say that's okay, let's do it anyway. That's okay.
There are so many examples of new offerings. I mean, every Watches and Wonders before that Basel World of new pieces that Patek Philippe would offer that I just that is horrible. And then I learned to love them. Like the 5960, for example, when it came out, was it 2007, 2008? I was like, where is Patek Philippe going? And then I learned to love that reference. Are there any new pieces that came out over the years that you just did not like and then learned to love?
But I think this is again back to music and film and stuff. We have these same associations. In often when a new album comes out from our favorite artist, it sometimes right away we love it, but other times our answer is, oh, it's not as good as the old stuff. But then as time passes, it starts to, become
percolate.
Exactly. And I think this is true with everything. I mean, the film by your favorite director comes out. Oh, but I love the older Tarantino films, whatever that might be, whoever that director might be. I love the older Catherine Bigelow films, whatever it might be. And then time passes and those start to change in our perception. I think that's part of the experience of digesting new content when we have strong associative experiences with a brand or with a creator. That's always the case with love and passion, because this is identity too. We're back to the psychology of it. These things matter to us. Therefore, if something that matters to us is outside the scope of what we feel as individuals it should be, the reaction can be a little caustic even at first. And maybe it remains that way. And other times it takes a little bit of time to pass. And the reverse can happen as well. I mean, I remember 50-20s as a child of the 70s and 80s. The 50-20 was incredible to me in the 90s and late 90s, early 2000s. But now I like the watch, but I'm actually far more excited about a 5970 than I am in a 50-20, for example. But if you had told me 20 years ago, you're going to favor the 5970 over the 50-20, I'd be like, no way, John. The 50-20 is special. It's different. It's cushion. But no, so that had the reverse impact on me. I adored that watch. I still think it's cool, but it doesn't cut through the timeline like a 5970 does.
Time has a way of changing taste and perception, and that's just life, isn't it?
And that's fun. I think that's a great joy of it. And then we come back around again. That's the best, is we fall in love with something, time changes, and then we can have the opportunity to rediscover it once again, either through our own lenses or through the lenses of somebody else that we're close to and care about.
I love going to the safe deposit box and taking out a watch I might not have even looked at in 10 years.
Yes.
It is my new favorite.
Yes.
And that's such a wonderful feeling. And I think a lot of collectors have experienced that.
Well, let's talk for a second. I mean, I know we're talking about the future, but, vintage Hamilton for you and I was very significant. That's what you and I were able to afford when we were young.
Yes.
And we used to talk about those models. Do you remember the Reardon?
The Hamilton Reardon. Yes.
And, I remember going through those books with you and looking at all the different shapes and the form language and the finishing and the piping rock with the enamel, the movable lugs.
Such a cool piece.
Yeah, we bugged out on those watches and we had completely adored them. That's an example of a category that meant so much to me at a young age that I disconnected with, not out of choice, just through life, that now I'm back into being like, wow.
It's nostalgic again, yeah.
Absolutely. Our own 30-year cycles. Yeah.
Maybe our clock shop, we could sell some old vintage American watches too, right?
Yeah, well, you've been working on that. You've been a cheerleader for the American watch industry forever.
There's so much work that needs to be done there.
But it is nice to see we're in a bit of a revolution as well. There's some awesome American brands doing great creative work right now, and I'm glad that they're being recognized and talked about.
It's a story that's still being told.
Indeed.
Speaking of a story that's just starting to be told, let's talk about your new company. You are now founder and director of the Pattern Recognition Agency. I have so many questions about this new project. First, can you tell me about the name?
Absolutely. I mean, we touched upon it earlier in part one, but how important that notion of, first of all, I wanted to create the brand not around the name of an individual, which how things have classically been done. I feel that the next era of watchmaking has to be associated with ideas and concepts. I'm not a watchmaker. I would never name a company after me. It had to be something different in that sense. And pattern recognition, as we talked about before, is something we all experience. I love the universality of things. And time measurement is the only equalizer across all of us. Water isn't equal, air is not equal, shelter's not equal. Time is something we all share in the exact same way. So is memory, and so is pattern recognition, the way, as we talked about, the way we process the present and future based on our learnings of the patterns of the past. All of these ideas come together. So I wanted to begin with a concept that was universal in that sense, and that was bigger than the watch industry, but also encompassing of the watch industry. And then in terms of design, to begin with, I'm touching upon the past, but touching upon the future, but I'm approaching this a little differently. It's a bit strange, but I wanted to envision a parallel world where high-end watchmaking two things. One, never became solely centralized in Switzerland, because as you know, the origins of watchmaking are far broader than that. They were perfected in Switzerland, and of course my watches will still be made in Switzerland and hand finished and all of this. But what does something look like if it wasn't part of that historical timeline where everything condensed to the same sort of approach? And then two, a world where what would things look like if high-end watchmaking never disappeared for 10, 20 years? What if it had proliferated during the quartz era? What if mechanical objects continued to be woven into broader aesthetics? That's where I'm coming from. So I'm going to be touching upon design and jewelry and objects d'art in that sense. Of course, still a watch, but something that breaks the borders a little bit. And I have the privilege of working with, because again, I'm not a watchmaker. I'm working with some incredible people, former colleagues, many of them.
Can you mention any of the people involved?
Happily. On the design side, I'm working with Claude Meneger, who developed the AP concept back in '02, as well as many other watches. Claude is a great friend, an incredible talent. He's able to take my ideas and horrible sketches and turn them into something very real and beautiful. And on the movement, Fabrice Deschanel, who's also a former colleague, and is just one of the masters of contemporary movements and design. He's behind so many important watches across so many brands, like Claude as well. And these are people I admire so much. And then on the actual physical creation of the watches, I'm working with my close friends at a company called Vanguard. My friends Axel and Jeremy, again, former APRP colleagues who have developed their own incredible tourbillon with automated dial display. It's called the Black Hole. It's really out there. But they're the ones who are able to take this concept and turn it into reality. So hopefully I'll have the first protos, fully functional prototypes, in about 1 year from now. Currently, we're doing design refinement, movement study, and testing the ergonomics through 3D printing. And it's just been so wild and so fun and a challenge in all the right ways.
As you know, we just had Kevin O'Leary on board. So this is a Shark Tank question I'm about to ask you. You have 30 seconds to tell our listeners of what pattern recognition is all about and your vision for the company.
So for pattern recognition and these watches that I'm beginning to conceptualize and develop, the whole mission and the whole key behind this is to create something that optimizes not only mechanical expression, but touching upon jewelry and design through aesthetics, and looking at the ergonomics and the feel as the primary access point. It's not the most complicated watch. It's complicated, but it's all about the design, the comfort, the aesthetics. I want it to feel like a second skin, like the most beautiful piece of jewelry on the wrist.
Time. You did it. Well done. My follow-up question.
Yes.
If you had 10 times the startup budget that you have right now, what would you spend it on?
If I had 10 times a startup budget, it would be about bringing more in-house. So it would be about hiring incredible talent from hand finishing through CNC process, key individuals to be able to keep the development process moving faster. And right now I'm working with incredible suppliers, but it's all through the network. It's all the old school way, the établissage system. And that's wonderful and beautiful. And I would always continue doing that. But having a few of the machines under my own roof and a few of the experts and masters who can do that would, of course, be able to allow the ideas to come to life faster.
Now, I look at you as a hugely productive entrepreneur. And in your life, you've produced, so many books and articles and research. You get stuff done. What is your productivity hack that you'd be willing to share with us?
Absolutely. I think it's about staying focused on projects along the way. And it's to separate think tanking from action and to make sure that we keep both of those activities present at all time. If we overindulge in just the creation, we lose the creative spark. And if we overindulge in the creative spark, we lose that ability to actually produce. So again, I'm back to music and film in that sense, and art. The artist has to walk away from the canvas at some point. The musician has to leave the studio at some point and hand it off to the next team to finish. Those are very important lessons, and this is why I remain so close to that world. And I communicate very openly with people from that world about how they approach this themselves. So that's the big key, is know when to walk away, know when to let something go. It's very, very easy not to do that. And fortunately, I have a support system in place to help with that. My wife, Geraldine, is so significant to that. She can see when I'm going down the rabbit hole too far, and she'll be like, hey, you got to Get back to it. Get that on paper. Get that out there. Pass it back to Claude so we can work on it. Those checks and balances are significant, as well as keeping friends in the loop along the way. I've always had and always will have a team of advisors and friends and associates whom I could learn from. They used to all be older than me. Now most of them are younger than me, but that's okay. And that's amazing to have. So it's also keeping the feedback loop alive. And I encourage everyone to do that no matter what field or what discipline you're in, is share with the people that are close to you. Be open to harsh criticism and feedback. Welcome it. Digest it as best as you can. It's not always easy to do that, but it's so significant because even if it hurts our feelings and even if we stick with our guns, we're going to be stronger for it at the end of the day.
I think this is one thing our friends in Switzerland could learn from Americans. A healthy feedback loop is a good thing. Because I'm not talking about any particular company, but there are a lot of European companies specifically that don't have that feedback loops, and management exists in a silo, and they don't know what's going on in the marketplace. So I think your advice as an entrepreneur would be really well taken by many in big companies and those that are in startups. So thank you for that.
My pleasure.
Now let's move back to some of your educational pursuits from the past. I mean, in a way of what you've done to give back, because you've always given back to the horological world through education.
I've been trying.
Yes.
Doing the best I can.
Great job.
Thank you.
In particular, let's discuss your involvement in Keeper of Time. Full disclosure, I'm one of the executive producers, as you know, and Michael is one of the stars of the movie. You must watch this movie if you haven't seen it already. To all of our listeners, please check out Keeper of Time, and it's available to download online. Michael, can you tell us about your involvement in the movie and maybe your opinion of why people should watch it?
It's Michael, the director, did such a personal take on this story of time measurement because he was discovering and learning during the process of filming. He, like any great documentary filmmaker with a clear vision, the discovery is part of the filmmaking process. And he dove in entirely. For me, what was unexpected, I think, for both Michael and I, when we started shooting, and it was all done very fast. I think we shot in just a couple of hours, all those segments, was initially I thought I'd be talking about the Vallée des Joues and the Swiss watchmaking industry, but it ended up being all about pre-mechanical timepieces. So for me, it was really wonderful because it was back to my origins of sundials and obelisks and astrolabes and fire clocks and all of these incredible objects which are the foundation of all modern horology and all of time measurement today. So it was very cool to be able to dive into that subject material. And what made it more exciting was the fact of who was involved with producing it. Incredibly close and well-respected friends like yourself and Eric Koo and William and just some incredible talent. But then also who else was involved in the film in terms of subjects. So, I mean, it's very humbling to be in a piece with one of our amazing mutual mentors and friends, Will Andrews. It's incredible to be in a piece with watchmakers like Roger Smith and Jorn. I mean, and Max. I mean, it's a really cool opportunity to do it in that sense. So I was really proud to represent ancient timepieces, a little bit on Audemars Piguet and the Swiss watchmaking industry, but also just to be part of this film that for the first time was exploring everything from the Prague astronomical clock to the philosophy of timekeeping and time measurement. I was pretty blown away by the final product and very, very humbled to be in a project with such incredible experts and scholars, each in their own right.
And that is one way to spend 2 hours to have a master class.
Yes.
In horology. And I hope it infects a new generation into wanting to learn more of how art and science come together in these objects that we love so much. So.
Absolutely. I mean, my favorite scenes in that movie are it's Will Andrews exploring the sundials. And I mean, you and I, our love for Will is huge for all the right reasons. But I think I mentioned earlier about our shared passion. Will and Robert Cheney, who we talked about earlier, and Carlene Stevens, who I know you've had on the show, those three, for me, were the ones that really demonstrated, not just through their knowledge, but through their behavior, through their actions, through their words, through their commitment of the way to find not only a career and work, but to express as an individual and to find happiness and meaning in the work. And I'm so grateful, John, that we have these mentors, that we have these people. And if I can pass on 1/20th of what I've received from those people, I'll be more than happy. And this is, again, I do all I can to mentor and to bring people up. And even though I'm in Switzerland, to stay associated with the Horological Society of New York and to be there and to be present for young people who are entering this field and getting into this business in a deep way.
And speaking of the HSNY, you are a longtime supporter. You're many mutual friends. And you also, it's been 5 years ago now, you gave a very important lecture, in my opinion.
Thank you.
At the HSNY. And I recently watched it again.
Oh, wow.
And it's aged very well, by the way, 5 years on. So I encourage people to go on YouTube and check out the Horological Society of New York and watch Michael Friedman's lecture. It's must-see TV for the world of horology.
I remember correctly, I haven't looked at that one, but that had a lot with the Metropolitan Museum of Art collection, right?
Yes.
'Cause at that time, I was consulting the Met on one of the Luxury of Time exhibition. And so it was, and which I think you were, did you work a little bit on that one as well? Okay. It was a really incredible exhibition. And by the way, that's something I love to mention to people is the greatest museums in the world are flooded with watches and clocks. Mm-hmm. It's something that they're there. You sometimes have to explore and find them. But the Met's collection, wow.
It's time to go back.
We got to do that together on my next trip to New York. We should do the museum.
That would be
trip.
fun. We should record it too. I think cool. Because one of the things that you've done your whole career is you put it in historic context, and you go before mechanical timekeeping. Your storytelling often, like you mentioned earlier, it starts with water clocks, incense clocks, and how it's inextricably connected to astrolabes and early scientific instruments, and ultimately how that connects with clockmaking and watchmaking, and how art and functionality become one. And this has been your storyline, and you've really helped so many people understand it in an engaging way.
Oh, thank you, John. It's really, I don't know, to hear that's incredible. I appreciate that so much. I think Willard House, we were lucky to be there when we were. You know, for those of you who don't know, the Willard family were the clockmakers of the U.S. presidents and politicians. So our origin point in this field was bringing the cultural connections to the forefront. You know, you can't speak about the Willards without speaking about the context in which those clocks, who they were made for, and where they sit to this day. So it's very significant. And that time, that while brief, that we spent at Willard House was without question foundational.
And we're no longer the kids in the basement.
Far from it.
And here's my follow-up question. What should veterans and leaders in the horological world stop doing today?
I think what we should stop doing is, I think we need to do what we can to bring a positivity, optimism, and to keep expanding the tent. The tent has become too small in my mind. We've become too critical of what doesn't speak to us emotionally. And this is something I've been working on to see how we can change the dialogue shift a little bit. It's okay to not like something. It's okay for something to not be made for you or produced for you. But it's also good to then acknowledge, well, somebody loves this. And instead of me thinking about what I don't love about it, which is important, it's also good to balance that with, well, what does somebody love about this? And this is, to me, where the real fun and magic comes in. And it's back to that notion of empathy. It's for me, the balance is that IQ, EQ sensibility. There's a lot of intellectual knowledge out there today, more than ever. The expertise level is off the charts. People have access to so much information and knowledge. I think maybe where we can see some more development and where veterans can help lead this is opening up the empathy discussion across the field and discipline beyond what our own primary focal point is. You know, again, we talked about clocks a little bit before there. Clocks are very much out of trend and out of fashion today. It doesn't mean we need to bring back the clocks. It's not that. But just the mere conversation of reminding people that watches are an extension of clocks in many, many respects. And they share so much DNA. It's incredible. And not only that, clocks bring in this whole connection back to furniture and design through a different lens. It's not to tell watch people to fall in love with clocks at all, but it's important to see where we've come from and how all of this connects. That for me is, I think, on the veterans to broaden the dialogue, because we're in an era of hyper-specialization. That's awesome. But hyper-specialization will ultimately hit a blockade if the dialogue in the tent doesn't open up further.
Yeah, if the negativity just keeps reinforcing, it could it just gets squash people's dreams or interests. I mean, there's people that want to share, question, especially with social media, and you do see people being attacked for sharing an opinion. So I really liked what the industry should not be doing, or some of the leaders should not be doing. I mean, there's room for collecting everything from the Hamiltons we love to multi-million-dollar $24.99s. There's room for everyone.
Absolutely.
And you brought up a 3-letter word that's very important to me, and that's F-U-N. It's incredible to think that people sometimes forget this, but should collecting be fun?
Fun has to be the priority.
Yes.
Otherwise, it becomes a chore. We have to. The people who collect over a lifetime are the ones who find true enjoyment and fun with it. If it just becomes a chore, if it just becomes a hustle, it's a job at that point. Not even necessarily a career. It's a job. It's a function. It's nothing wrong with people who treat it this way whatsoever. But if this industry, if this field and its connecting fields began as fun for you, the trick is to strive as much as possible to keep it that way. It's not always easy to do, especially for collectors and consumers when brands in their mind are not allocating to them or not producing enough or passing on them for someone else. That can really take the fun out of it. And I can understand that very, very well and very, very sensitively. But the importance is to do what we can to keep that enjoyment factor going. It's critical. It's because, again, to me, nothing celebrates life more than the exploration of time. It goes fast, as you and I know. It goes fast. This is the common denominator for all of us. Watches are an expression of this. Yes, this touches upon different notions and different topics. It's not comfortable for everyone to talk about these ideas and these notions. But to me, that's what makes it so fun, so enjoyable, and meaningful as well.
Speaking of time and place, I'm going back to a certain United Airlines flight from Newark to Geneva. I was boarding the plane and was so happy to see Michael Friedman. We were both very lucky to be sitting in business class for that flight. And I saw you were sitting alone. I was like 2 rows behind you on the left. And I asked, this is how I remember. I was like, Michael, can I sit next to you? It's like, let's catch up. And you glanced up and you uncomfortably are like, no. And then you pointed to the reason why. Now the story's over to you. What happened?
Oh man, that flight. So we weren't alone. We were flying over for the auction, so we knew quite a few people in that section of the airplane. Some of our mutual friends and colleagues were on there as well. Yeah, I was on the window side of in the front, and right before the plane was going to close, a beautiful woman entered the airplane and was about to sit down next to me. That was her seat. And I think you were going to see if they would change seats with you because we knew each other. And I'm really glad I shook you off, because while that woman was and is way out of my league, for some right reason, my charm meter was at the right level on that flight. And Geraldine is now my wife, and we have 2 young children, and I couldn't be happier. So you were there the flight that I met my now wife.
For all watch nerds out there, this is a story that gives hope. Because when I saw the Geraldine, because we didn't know her name then, the most beautiful woman come on the flight and sit next to Michael, I was like, this would only happen to Michael Friedman in his life.
And it had never happened to me before. Yes.
Yeah. And then the next morning, I was like, how's the flight? He's like, amazing. and then how much longer you were married? I mean,
a couple years later. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, and now you're a dad. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
I know. I think about that a lot, and that day a lot. We both do, and it's it was a really, really crazy and special moment, and I'm glad I had some friends there to witness it. So it was
history.
True story.
So now you're living and working in Switzerland. What's your daily life like, and how do you balance work and life?
It's a great question. It's not easy. I've been in Switzerland full time since 2017. Sold my place in Brooklyn, and now full on. And my kids are Swiss and French and American, and the life balance it's incredible now. I mean, the hours are stretched, the day is long, but it's so fun. And being an entrepreneur and having my own company means that I can choose to be there to see my kids off to school, to pick them up from creche, to be there all on the weekends as much as humanly possible. Even this New York trip, I'm making sure I'm back early Saturday morning to get my daughter to swim class. I mean, I couldn't do that working for a big brand so easily. That's very significant and very important for me. But the hours of working are strange. You squeeze it in every moment you can. I tend to work not only throughout the day, but the magic hours for me are often from 8:30 p.m. till 11:30 p.m. My wife can relax, watch some TV after a long day work being a lawyer, and the kids are asleep. But New York is very active, LA is very active, Asia will be waking up soon. So I'm able to get a lot done during those hours. And just like we talked about before, I balance a day for writing, for design, for movement exploration, as well as for consulting. And I do, through the agency, consult a couple brands whom I mentioned a couple of them before earlier. So it's a very good balance, but I also have to be cautious not to take on too much as well.
Can you tell us a bit about the new book that's in the works?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. So the book it's somewhat autobiographical in that sense. I'm looking at how pop culture transformed luxury watch space, but it's all done through the perspective of me, this watch geek who unintentionally ended up in these spaces I shouldn't have been. And we talked about Clapton a little bit earlier, and through my work with Eric, which continued for many years, I met such an extraordinary people who I admired from the world of music. Early on, I met John Mayer, who's still a close friend to this day. That was back in 2004. John acquired my dad's Patek 3970, by the way, which is just crazy.
That's so cool.
I think that was his first complicated Patek.
He still has it?
I don't know. I'm not
He
sure.
better have
I don't know. It's okay. I'm not sure. And and Jay is a big chapter in there, Jay-Z. While I don't know Jay-Z personally so well, we had incredible interactions not even through watches, but through movie scripts in 2004, 5, 6 era. And then we reconnected over watches during my time at AP. And then Kendrick and Dave Free, who have really been huge in my life the last few years, who we met through mutual friends. And they've been a big part of my company. The logos I've created for my company were done in partnership with a great friend who works between PG Lang, which is Kendrick and Dave's company, also working with pattern recognition. And it's been such an incredible pleasure to be able to experience a little bit of life with these geniuses. And Kendrick, and for me, is just on another level. And I value those moments I have with him so tremendously. And I honestly don't think I would have been able to do what I'm doing today without support from those guys. Not financially, I'm talking the real spiritual support, the belief that, you got to create your own thing. You got to do your own work. You got to express your own vision. You're an artist. We all carry insecurities around with us. And to have people we admire so much in their own space give that encouragement back it goes such a long way. It goes such a long way.
What's it like having your name, Michael Friedman, as a lyric in a Kendrick Lamar song? And how did it change your life, if anything? Did it?
It was really surreal. This is in the book. I had no clue this was going to happen. I had been spending time with them, some very important moments with them in conversations, but you don't know how you are or are not affecting people in your life. And I had no clue that was going to happen. And it was actually John Mayer who heard the lyric first. We had dinner that night. I was in New York, just 15 months ago or so. John and I had dinner, and he called like in the middle of the night. And he was like, "You got to download the new Kendrick record now. You got to listen to Rich Spirit. Go, I want to be on the phone with you when you do this." And it was a real shock. I had no idea. It was surreal. I called Kendrick right away. He picked up. He was in Ghana at the time and just laughed. He just, he knew that was something unexpected and really fun and really cool. And I think it changed my life in the sense that some people I hadn't heard from in a long time reconnected and were sort of surprised at that. And it was just organic and real and really just something that was a result of friendship and connection. I was just with him and the PG Lang team down in Frauenfeld, Switzerland. They were doing a festival down there. So very strange to hear it live as well in that sense. And to be one little footnote on one little song in his catalog is something that my kids will be able to point to, and that's fun. That's special. It means a lot. It means a lot.
It was just shocking. I thought it was so cool when that came out. You actually, I never told you this, and this is going to sound like it's a joke, but it's true. You know the song from Little Uzi Vert, it's like Patek Philippe, Too Much Sauce. I decided to reach out to his people and see if there could be some sort of collaboration, because I'd love to, drop some Patek knowledge in a song, and I never heard back from them.
No.
So, you know what? But you get that stuff done. So I'm impressed.
It was accidental, unexpected, just a result of life.
That's just fantastic. And just your community of collectors that you work with is incredible. You must pinch yourself. I mean, you're picking up the phone and talking to some of the most influential entertainers in the world, in some case collectors in the world, in some case both. That makes things interesting.
Well, you know what that's about as well. I mean, you and I share some of those dear friends.
Yes.
And we're lucky that there are people in these huge noted positions who have such respect and admiration for this industry and the hardworking people that create these objects across brands. So,
and we're so fortunate. They're collectors first. These aren't endorsements. These are collectors that are getting in line with everyone else to buy their dream watch.
Oh yeah.
They're the brands that are out there trying to give the freebies. No one's interested in the freebies.
Right.
They want to get in line like all the other top collectors in the world.
Indeed. And we meet them on terms that are not from their profession. And that's the difference. I remember when I was still with AP doing the first golf event I did. It was down at Ian Poulter's house. And I met someone because I don't follow golf. I don't like golf. I was hit with a golf club when I was a kid. Oof. You can still see the scar on my face. I always avoided the sport, but I was asked to go down to Ian's birthday in connection to his car collection, and I was happy to do that. And I was talking to who I thought was a client. And the client said to me, "Do you like golf?" And I was like, "Oh man, I respect it, but it's not my sport. What about you?" And he giggled and he was like, "Yeah, I like it." Turned out it was Henrik Stenson.
Oh, wow.
And he ended up becoming a friend because the fact that we met I didn't know who he was. I thought he was a watch collector, and it's embarrassing now that I didn't know who he was, given how famous of a golf player he was. But we started our connection on the right terms, not because I was a fan, but because it was about watches, which is something we both love and appreciate.
Watches connect people. And I must say, in my book, you are not only a dear friend, you are a horological celebrity. And it comes back to that celebrity, the quote, "the most interesting man in the horological world." That's you. That's you, Michael.
That's a hard one to digest. I don't know. There's a lot of interesting people in this industry, but if I'm one of the many, that's an honor to be included, truly.
And here's my drop the mic moment as we wrap things up.
Okay.
I have to bring up Chronoserf. This is your band from 10 years ago. It recorded such horological hits such as Severe Astronomy. All right, what does that bring back for you to listen to this music?
Well, look, I've always loved music. I was never good enough to make it a career, but I always have loved it. And back during the time in between my own company and joining AP, I had some time on my hands. So I met up with a friend who is a proper musician who helped me realize these songs. And I still play, I still write, I still record, but it's all for fun. Most importantly about music is I'm seeing my kids catch the bug. Already my 4-year-old has an incredible rendition of Five Little Monkeys jumping on the bed on her ukulele.
All right.
I'll share it with you when we wrap up. It's really, really cool. But again, the most important thing for me is it's fun. Back to your word earlier, it's an escape. It's a release, and it's another way to express ourselves.
Yeah, I was listening to your songs, 4 songs that are on Apple Music.
Yeah,
and I was listening to my kids, and they're like, "That's not that bad. It's actually you have a great singing voice."
Oh, I don't know about that.
So
I'm sitting on some other finished music, but it's so not my career that to me it's like at this point, music for me, I'm like the guy or the woman who does art in their house with no intention of selling it or revealing it. It's for myself. But thank you, John. I appreciate that very much.
I respect your passion.
Thank you.
I want to thank you so much, Michael, for joining us today. This is a conversation I will never forget. Any parting words you'd like to share with us?
I want to thank you and your listeners. As I mentioned earlier, I'm happy to celebrate our very long friendship, which will be hitting 30 years before long, of sharing some of these stories, and most importantly, the fact of that you and your team are continuing this very important pursuit of bringing Patek Philippe knowledge to a new level, to ever-increasing audiences, and how significant this is for the future of collecting. It's a real honor to be here, and when you invited me to participate, as you know, I didn't hesitate. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. It means the world to me. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe so that you don't miss any future episodes. This is John Reardon for Collectability.